Can you believe that I am finally writing my story? I actually really have thought about this for a very long time. Probably about 10 years or something, because I thought, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if I just wrote my story? I can put all the details I remember in this one story so that it could just be a place where people can read and like learn stuff and maybe like just get an idea of the mindset or whatever that I've learned or overcome and things like that. How cool would it be? But guess what happened? I put it off, like I always do with everything. I put it off for years and years because I was like, oh, I can't write properly. Oh, I still remember that day. Maybe like a few years ago, I think maybe 5 years ago or even longer, I took out a notepad. I started writing a few sentences and then I was like, what the hell is this? And then I deleted it. Just like the first time I recorded a video, I thought, oh, this wasn't good enough, so I deleted the whole thing. I did the same thing with writing because I just didn't feel that confident with writing at the time. And I'm kind of almost glad I did that because I do feel like now I have sort of slightly better way of communicating, even though I haven't written in many years. What I do find that is I can communicate or articulate my thoughts better than I used to. So when I'm writing, I'm finding that I'm actually able to add some bits and pieces that I don't think I would have been able to do years ago. So that is always a good thing. Sometimes when you're not ready, maybe you just aren't ready and you need to work on the skills a bit more or just do other things until you feel more ready. But what actually really made me decide to go into it is because I was reading like a passage of a book and there was just some things in there that just made me feel like, oh, I can write my own story. Like, the way the passage of what I read was not too complicated. It just felt like everyday language people would say to someone, and it wasn't like this complicated writing that you have to get it all perfect and get the writing in such a complicated way that like you're using language that you've never used before. Because I always thought that, oh, to write a story you have to use certain type of language and certain things that if you don't write it in a certain way then it's considered crap and then you shouldn't even bother. That's just my thought for a very long time. So when I read this passage, I didn't read the whole thing just because I haven't really had, more like I just put off reading in general because I have this problem with reading, but I will read more once I'm done kind of do my own story a bit more. But when I was just reading that, I was like, wow, like the way that story was written, I could write something like that. And that's what really got me thinking, maybe I should get this thing, like start writing my story. And then I opened up Notepad because that's what I had at the time, Notepad, because Word is like, you have to like get a subscription, which I actually still prefer the 2003 Word. But anyway, back to the point. I thought I'll just get a notepad and start writing again. So it's almost like a repeat of a few years ago when I started writing the first time. But this time I wrote further than a few paragraphs. I actually really went into the night writing about maybe even up to 5,000 words the first night. And that was absolutely crazy. I don't think I've ever written that much since I was a teenager when I used to write fanfics all the time, which I don't remember any of them. So it's like, but what I've noticed is whenever I write something, I find that I'm able to read it at first. Like at first when I'm reading over it, it's fine. Like I like it and everything's like, oh yeah, it's pretty cool. And after a while, when I've kind of forgotten about what I wrote, that's when it's very difficult to actually reread my stuff. And then when I do read it or try to, I find that, oh God, this is written so poorly, that's written so poorly, everything just seems to be not as good as I thought. And then it sends me into a panic and suddenly the whole thing is crap and then I feel like, oh, I cannot read it anymore. So that's probably why I can't read a lot of my old stuff, because it's almost like this sense of mystery, like you don't know what you've written that is kind of scaring you, and then when you do see something it may not be as well as you remembered, and for some reason when you're doing work on your own creative things, the more you look at it or the more you read it, the more problems you're going to find with it. So that's what I've always found with art and things like that. So anyway, like 3 or 4, maybe like 4 or 5 days ago, I think maybe a week, that doesn't really matter, but anyway, about a week ago I really started writing, and I remember that the first night I was really excited and I thought, let's see how long this is going to last, because usually those kind of things last like 3 days, I get all excited. I write it to a point and then I quit because it's just too hard, or I couldn't think of more, or it's not good enough, or whatever it is that's stopping me. But today is almost like 5 or 6 days later, and guess what? I'm still writing, and I'm actually adding more to it each time I'm on the computer, and I'm up to about 25,000 words, which is to me like a huge amount. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's that long considering an average novel, which I've actually looked up. An average novel is around 80,000 words, and then a novel that is too long is about 100,000 or something, like over 100,000. So what I really should aim for is about 80,000. I don't know if I'm going to get there, just because I don't know if I can come up with that much stuff to write about, because there's just so many things I can remember, and because it's not a fictional story, I'm not going to be able to just add random shit in there to make things up. So I have to go by what I remember, and unfortunately there's a lot of memories that are like very blank. So I have to just go by what I can remember and write about my experiences. So the story is really all about writing my early life and all my experience at that time, kind of like almost summing up all my videos about my experiences, summing it all up, or just making it like writing everything I can remember into one place so that like all the information is there. So it's kind of like if you're watching a video, you see here and there little bits and pieces, but this is going to be the full thing. You'll get the full picture and the full story, and then you'll see how I developed some of the issues that I had, or some of the mental problems, and how I've been able to overcome them, how it affected me throughout my childhood and my early adult life. These are all things that I write about. So it's really, really cool, because I'm actually finding it's really fun to write. Like what I'm doing is I did an outline. So in the beginning, I kind of just wrote the major events. And then I found as I think about it, sometimes I'll come up with 1 or 2 little bits and pieces of memory. So I'll just add it in where I feel like is appropriate, because sometimes you don't even know the timeline. Like you have these events, but you don't know exactly when it happened, or like whether this happened before or that. So you just try your best. That's what I've been doing. So yeah, I've been writing this thing, and right now it's like a lot of pages, and I'm separating it into the first part of the story, which is really a description of everything that's happened, is separated into like 3 categories. And the first category is like on the day that I arrived in Australia. That's basically where the story starts. So from then I keep writing until events happened, and then I'll go back a little bit to talk about my early life was before I arrived in Australia, and then I'll talk about high school years, and then I'm going to go on to talking about what is that? Oh, all the life lessons and the different topics, like anxiety, nausea is one of the big topics that I'm going to write about, because I'll write about all the things that I've experienced, like descriptions of the different things that I've felt and what helped me, what got me through. They're all going to be things that I'm going to talk a lot about. And then also about self-confidence, all the things that I had trouble with, all the problems I've had with every single job that I've ever had throughout the years. These are all the experiences that I'll be writing about, and talking about how my lack of self-confidence has really affected me throughout the years of different jobs, and just the things that I've learned from all the different things that's happened. And it's really cool, because I'm finding there's lots of interesting ways to try to remember more. And one of the things that I'm actually doing now is to dig up a lot of my old blog entries, because I used to write a lot of blogs, like personal blogs and diary entries. It's really cool to like try to find those and read through them, and then you will get a lot of insight with how, like, what happened at the time. You'll see a lot of things. Maybe you've always been the type to recount funny things that's happened or interesting things, and then you'll find, oh my god, this hilarious thing happened that day that I would have completely forgotten about if I didn't write about it. So that's what I've discovered, is those treasure troves of little diary entries, and just looking for them and writing them down. Also, like different things I've done over the years, like comics or poetry that I've written, are all things that I look at to kind of fill the gap with like extra memories. So those are really cool things. I think I will share some of them, like despite it being really embarrassing, because like the idea of sharing stuff I wrote in my teenage years is so embarrassing. I think pretty much everyone would feel that way about their own stuff. But anyway, yeah, it's just a really, really fun experience right now. And what's really helping me not to give up or quit is that desire to turn it into a book, because these days you'll find that it's so much easier to self-publish. Before, you're like, oh god, where am I going to find this? It's going to cost a lot of money, things like that. 20 years ago, it's not something that you can do that easily. But today, guess what? Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing does it so effortlessly. Like, I couldn't believe just how easy it is to set up and publish your own book that way. Like, seriously. Like, the only thing I really have to really consider doing is getting a good editor to edit the stuff after I finish, because I know my own grammar and my own English is not that good sometimes, and that's going to be something that I definitely would need to pay to get someone to do. So that's going to be interesting. I will be documenting everything that's happened with writing this story, because it's a very big experience for me. It's something that I never had done before, so it's also very new and kind of scary. So that's like exciting, because I've always had trouble with doing things that scare me. I think that's been my number one thing over the years, is that I buy a lot of equipment. I get really excited. I get into art. I get into all these things. I buy equipment. I get all this stuff trying to do something. And then what ends up happening is I'm too nervous or just overwhelmed by this thing that I don't know how to use, or whatever it is, that it's like I don't know how to sell, or what, you know what? I do know how to sell. It's more like I'm just nervous about it. A lot of times we'll come up with all these excuses like I don't know how to sell. You'll say that to yourself, even though you do know how to sell. It's more like, I just don't know if I can sell, is more like what you're saying. Like, what if you screw up the order and then people get really upset? That's also another worry of mine. Like, what if, like, when I'm trying to ship out stuff, like, I make a mistake? What if I can't get around to it? They're all things that you're going to come up with, like, reasons why you can't do it. And that's been my problem for the past so years. So it's like, oh, I got all this equipment to try this, but things are too hard and I quit. That's basically how everything has been so far. And with this story, I really want to make a big difference, because that's what I really want. The goal of this story is really to try to help people who've been in similar situations, to show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and even if things seem really bad, that one day they might come out the other side living a very fulfilling, happy life. That's my goal of this story, is that even though there's a lot of crap that happened in the beginning and throughout the middle of the story, you'll see a lot of how I was able to get through that. And that's what I really want to focus on, because it's all about like, hey, how did I turn all this stuff that happened into something that's so good now that I'm able to truly thrive and just feel happy every day? Because that's basically, I feel like I've been able to hit the lotto in that way, that despite a lot of stuff happening in my early life that should have been like really bad, should have been not should have been really bad, but should have been bad enough to maybe turn me into some crazy person that's doing crazy things right now. But I'm glad that it didn't. And I feel like it's a lot to do with some of the people I've met, some of the kindness I've received from different people throughout the years have really helped me get to where I am today. And I want to share that hope, that the story, because it's just like a story of hope, that you can have a really crappy childhood and feel shit about yourself for so many years, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. Like, you can one day turn things around and do wonderful things and feel very happy and fulfilled. That's my goal of this story. So I'm going to really go into detail of how I managed to find the inspiration, find all of that. And it's really wonderful because it's given me time to reflect on all the things that I've learned and all the things that I've been able to overcome, which is like bit by bit, slowly over time, I have just been able to overcome so many things I never thought I would be able to. Like right now, I'm really working on consistency and motivation. That's something that I've always had struggled with just staying consistent and motivated with one thing without giving up because it gets too stressful. That's probably my number one goal, is to work on that and be able to work on something, a project, like a single project. It could just be like making videos for the next 10 years rather than for the next year, quit for another 3 years and go back. That's what I've been kind of doing for the past 10 years is I do something, I get into it, I quit, and then I do something else, and then I quit that, and then I do something else, and I quit that. Like, it's just like quitting and starting new things, quitting. And it's all because of a thing called stress. To me, I feel like stress is like the number one thing to put me off something. And a lot of times I put this stress on myself. Like, I have this unrealistic expectation on myself where I'm like telling myself I have to do a certain amount of work a day, or if I don't come up with this, then I just cannot get through the day without completing so much amount of work. And that's a lot of times it's all my own doing because nobody is setting that expectation up besides myself. Like, it's happened all the time when I was doing art, when I was making cooking video, I mean not cooking videos, but cooking recipes. I've had like this self expectation that I had to make 2 recipes a day, not 1 but 2. It had to be 2. It had to be all photographed, done by the end of the day. I had to make 2. And that was every single day. Every single day. I didn't give myself a single day off. And when I think back to why I did this to myself, I really don't know. It's because I think it's because when I get really into something, I do a lot, but then that becomes the norm for me. I'm like, okay, since I've been doing 2 recipes a day because I really liked it at the time, I have to keep it up. And that's the really bad thing to think, because you think, oh, I have to keep it up. Then you're going to say things like, oh, even if today when I can't think of anything, I still have to make the recipe. And that has happened with drawing as well. And that's like, oh, if I can't think of what I'm going to draw today, I still have to draw. Like, even though I can't think of anything to draw, I still have to do it. So that's probably how I burned out in almost everything I've done. The drawing thing was similar in that I kept forcing myself to draw 1 picture a day. Like, when you think about, usually when you see artists, they take about like a month to complete a picture. They do it slowly and steadily and just not rush. But why am I so insistent on rushing everything? Like, seriously, that's just my big problem, and I'm always rushing myself to complete it. And then what end up happening is that I run out of ideas, and then I'm like stuck, and drawing becomes stressful because I'm like, oh, I have to do this, I have to get this done. And then the more you force it, the more it doesn't come to you. And that's unfortunately what I've learned, is that when you really want to force a picture, that's going to be very difficult, because you'll be sitting there thinking like, oh, I just can't think of anything to draw anymore. Like, what's up? And then you'll find that your work starts to get worse. Like, you'll actually find that as you progress, your work starts to get sloppy because you're forcing it, and it's just not good. I've had this problem with video making as well, and the one thing I'm really trying to do right now is trying to do the document over create, and that's helping me right now because I'm able to document my journey of doing something. So that's, to me, a lot easier than coming up with an idea. So instead of saying, oh, today I have to come up with this new topic that I'm just gonna have to not ram it in my ass. What am I thinking? Like, I just have to freaking think of this topic out of my ass. Instead of that, I'm thinking, okay, I am doing this right now. I'm writing a story. I can talk about it. I can talk about the story because that's relevant for me. It's going to be easy to talk about. Why not just talk about what my experiences are and my mindset and everything about it? Because that's going to be more relevant, and I'll be able to think of more things to say than, let's say, if I just randomly talked about something that wasn't happening right now in my life. Like, if I were to just come up with a random topic out of and then just come up with all these things about it that is not relevant right now, it's going to be so much harder. So that's really helped me with content creation, and writing this story has been such an exciting experience. And one thing that I noticed is when I go back to read it, I do find that I can write it better. So what I end up doing is that I'll read over the first passages, the first pages, and then I'll reread, and every single time I reread it, I do find that I'm able to take out parts and then change it and make it better, because I just find that when you're writing it the first time, it's always just very rushed, and you kind of just get the idea across. That's how I feel when I'm writing. The first time I write about this topic, like this event. It's like a description, okay, everything's good. And then when I see it the second time, I'm like, oh, I could change things here. I could change a few wording there. I can change things. And then I end up changing it. And the more I go back over the passage, the more I'm able to improve it. And that's really exciting because now when I'm reading back the first few paragraphs and the first few pages, it sounds so much better. It flows better than it does in the later, because the later I haven't had much time to go through it again. So it'll just be a process that I will have to go through and reread all the older parts and newer parts or whatever I'm writing. I just have to reread it so many times so I can improve it. And that's very important because it's really strange. Like when you first write something, it really is very just plain and simple language, and then as you just read it, you're like, oh, I can improve how I'm saying this, and that's really interesting. And one of the things that I'm really loving right now is just remembering some of the stuff that I would have forgotten if I didn't write this, because there's a lot of, you'll find a lot of memories are just like in the background. It's not something that you actively think of until something comes up. It's almost like when you wake up from a dream and you kind of have this idea of what you dreamed about, but it's all not even in your head anymore. And then something will happen in that time, like in the morning, you'll see something or hear something and it'll remind you suddenly of that dream, and you're like, oh, that's what I dreamed about. I've had those moments all the time. So writing this story has been similar in that way, that I go into writing it and then I write all these things, and then during the day I might just come across something that will just remind me of an event that's happened. I'll be like, oh yes, I'm gonna write it on my notepad. I'm gonna write the details of the what I actually remember. And then when I get home, I'll be like typing it all up. So that's really cool. That's really exciting because you'll find that's going to just add so much more layers to your own story by that. And it's just so important for me right now to just keep going with something. Like for me, the mindset that I've tried to work on all my life is to just keep going with something. I feel like the only time that I just give up completely and stop doing it is when, like, it's like that's the only time I would truly really fail at something, if I just completely give up on it, because then I won't ever get to where I want to. I mean, I feel like it's so much better to at least try to write the story, to try to publish it, to try to get it out there, than just live my life wondering what if I had done this. I just feel like I need to change my train of thoughts. I need to like get more comfortable with fear. And that's one thing that I've just been working on, because fear, as I've always mentioned, is the one thing that stops me from doing pretty much anything. And once you're aware of it, once you're really aware of it, not just like 10% aware of it, you can be very, very aware of it, or you can be 10% aware of it, which is like you kind of know, okay, it's a bit scary, I don't want to do it. But when you're really aware that fear is the reason why you don't do things, you start to actually really start figuring out how to get through this fear. And I've come up with quite a few techniques that's worked for me over the past so and so much month. And one of the things that I find working for me is the Dr. K method, which is to expose myself to what I want to do. So what I've been doing is I've been really forcing myself to read more about it, to learn more about self-publishing, to watch videos about it. So instead of just reading it about it once and then never looking at the site, I'm forcing myself on the Amazon Kindle publishing site and a bunch of other sites. I'm forcing myself on the sites because I know it's going to keep me interested. Whereas if I just visit it once and then just not look at it again, I'm likely to forget about it after a week, and what'll happen is I'll just have this bloody story all typed up, never actually doing anything about it. And then a few months later, I would have forgotten everything I wrote, and then I'd be embarrassed to read my own story again to even make it into a thing. I could see that coming with my old self. So maybe that's also why I made the decision to really share my journey about it, because if I share it, it's even more like I'm held accountable for this. Like I can't just say, oh, I'm doing all this publishing stuff, like I'm writing a story and then never mention it again, right? It's kind of, you have a little more pressure to keep going, and sometimes you do need a little bit of a pressure, or like at least tell someone about it so that you can be more accountable for it. That's what I feel like really helps me. It's like if I talk about like, oh, I'm going to do this, then I'm more likely going to follow through. And I also have to really work out, okay, what is making me nervous right now? What is the things that's stopping me? The thing that's stopping me right now is probably the daunting task of finding an editor. To me, that is a really, really scary thing, because I'd have to contact someone, I'd have to search up someone, I'd have to search up an editor, and then I would have to send them the text, and that's not the hard part. The hard part would be like the embarrassment maybe feeling that I would get when they're editing the stuff or talking to me about it. Maybe to me it's like embarrassing for someone else to read it, even though I know that has to be done, because I would not want my English or my writing to be out as the final copy, because like without being edited, because I know that I really suck at some of the like ways of writing, and I mix up tenses all the time, and I always mix up things. And I still remember one of my early stories, I would write it in a like a third person's point of view, right? And then all of a sudden, like after a while, I started writing in a first person point of view without realizing that's inconsistent. So that's something I've done in the past that I need to be aware of. And it's just so funny because you don't really think about it like when you're writing it, and then when you read it, you're like, oh, how come I'm saying like this character this, and then you're giving the she and stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like what's going on? I've done that before without realizing. And I guess I just have to read it many times to make sure it actually flows in my head, because a lot of times I'm not that trained well with grammar and English. Like I still feel like I just don't write that well, because growing up as English as a second language, I felt like I had a lot more trouble with English than the average person. Even when I was at the same age as some of my friends, what I found was they understood a lot of words that I didn't. They'd say all these words and I'd be like, what does that mean? Like I just didn't really understand the word. And even now, there are still lots of words that people say that I'd be like, what does that even mean? Like I've never heard of it. I guess like I have this trouble with comprehension. So to me, it's actually really hard to comprehend reading like text. So I have trouble reading because a lot of times I find that if I'm stuck on a word or a sentence where I don't understand what's happening, I can't move forward. So then I end up losing all my progress of where I've been up to, and then text just feels completely meaningless, as in I don't understand what it's trying to say anymore. And then I lose where I am in the story, and then all of a sudden like the book makes no sense. And that's how I have trouble reading, and I always like disliked reading when I was younger because of that problem. I just feel like I'm reading a bunch of shit and I don't know what I'm reading. I don't even understand what's happening. And a lot of times it's because of people writing words like written in like certain words written in a way that I didn't understand the meaning. And because sometimes I'd be too lazy to look up the dictionary and find out the meaning, which today is really easy if you think about it. You just type it in like Google or ChatGPT and you get the answer right away. But back then you'd have to actually open a dictionary. It was much more annoying, and I just found myself skipping over parts that I didn't understand, and because I skipped over, I would just be lost. And I noticed that with the shows as well. Like I've a lot of people can just like get their mind to wrap it around. Like, you know, they can still follow a story if they don't know all the information. But for me, I find it very hard. I need to know all of this information before I continue with the story. So that's been really challenging for me. So when I'm writing the story, I try to write it in the way that I would understand it well. So maybe that will help some people who have trouble comprehending like I do. So you know what? I'm not going to put too much pressure about writing it perfectly the way I think text should be written. I'm just going to write it in a way that I feel like I would understand it easily. So that's what I've been trying to do. So I'm not too worried about like whether it's like descriptive. And well, you know what? I always try to make it descriptive, but I'm not too worried about not using fancy words. So that's one of the things that I have trouble with, is figuring out how to use fancy words, because I just don't know that many really cool sounding words, because like if I knew them I would be able to write like read those books better, right? But still, it's been really fun. It's been such a learning experience, because I'm finding that even now I'm finding more ways to stay motivated with something. It's helping me realize that, hey, I gotta save money if I want to get this done properly. I need to save money to get this done. So it's actually giving me an opportunity to really think about, oh, I shouldn't spend things on dumb shit, you know? It's like, I gotta like not buy this crap that I usually do, instead of wasting my time during the day with like many hours just looking for things to buy, which I haven't done in a little while. I don't know how long I can make it last, but I'm going to try as much as I can to just try not to buy all this stupid things and like waste my money. Maybe I will even think of how to make some money if I need it so bad, because I always have felt that I'm the type of person, if I really, really want something done, I can do it, but I have to have that 150% motivation to get it done. So who knows, maybe if I really want to save the money for this book, I will, and that's going to be really exciting, because I don't think I've ever had that motivation to really save money. So now it's going to be a fun thing to see how I can do that. And a lot of times I find like I have to remind myself, because sometimes I don't know if anyone else have ever experienced this, but sometimes I will live my life feeling a little bit sad if I don't do new things in the day. It kind of is that dull feeling that you're living the same life every day kind of feeling. You just really crave like experiencing something new, like maybe go to a new place or visit somewhere new, but you know that at the moment you're not in that situation when you can do that. Like maybe you don't have enough money, or maybe it's just like kids and stuff, like you know, you just can't travel or do the fun things that you really crave. And a lot of times, because of that little bit of a sad feeling, you end up just wanting that dopamine hit by spending money. That's how I've always felt anyway, because I crave for new experiences. And whenever I just go through the day just doing the same things, like go to the same places, not really experiencing something new, my brain feels like it's in a fog. And because of that, I'm craving for this excitement. I'm craving for this thing that I want to happen, and what I end up doing is spending money, because that gives you a bit of a dopamine hit for that moment, usually for a short moment, and then after that, if it's an expensive thing, you'll be like, why the hell did I buy that, right? So right now I'm trying to focus my energy on writing this story so that I'm not focusing so much about what I'm buying. I'm still going out and doing fun things, but for a shorter amount of time, so that I don't have as much time to look at things to buy. And it's working really well, because what I'm doing right now is I'm finding that I'm mostly just spending money on food that I'm eating, and that's about it. I haven't bought anything big for a while. When I say a while, I mean like a week. I know, to me that's like pretty freaking amazing. If you think about my track record, go back and watch all my freaking videos about all the dumb stuff I bought, like, I don't know, bird cages that had to get a crane to move it in, you know, all those things are like things that I impulse buy, because I feel like I'm in that little bit of a sad feeling where life is the same and I just want something exciting to happen. And a lot of times you can't see through that, and you just want to experience something new so bad that you do anything to get rid of that bit of that depressed feeling. And I feel that that's very important to acknowledge. So right now I'm going to do what I've never done before, which is really put my head down and work on something. And then when I finish work on something, I'm going to really do my best to, you know, to do what I said I was going to do, which is to, like, you know, self-publish this story and keep making videos so that I can one day be able to go to the places that I want to, go on the trips that I desire so bad, to, you know, experience the new things that I want to. Because a lot of times you'll find that if you're just living life doing the same things every day, you quickly start to feel like you're losing the meaning of life. That's what I've always found, that whenever I feel like, oh, it's like, oh, what am I just doing? I'm just like getting up every day, doing the same thing. To me, that is a really sad feeling. So I feel like when we have a plan, when we have this goal or this thing that we're working towards, it's so much more exciting that you can actually just think about, okay, what can I do today that I'm going to do, put my head down, work on this, and then I'm going to have what I want in, you know, like give yourself 10 or 20 years time or something. Like, to me, I need to imagine that happy feeling of reaching that one day, to just really be okay with not getting that right now. Because patience is, again, one of the best things that you can ever do. Patience is very important, and I've been always lacking patience, and that's probably why nothing ever grows in my yard. And I never get things done because I'm impatient, and impatience will often cause a lack of motivation because you want things to be done right now, and when it doesn't, you're just like, why bother, right? But now I have to start detaching all my expectations from my motivations. So that's very important as well. I've been doing is that I have to not feel like I'm tying like an end result with what I'm doing. So what I'm doing right now, I can't be writing this story and thinking, oh, I have to sell a certain amount of books, or I have to get a certain amount of people being interested or whatever. I can't think like that because then I'm just going to get stressed about it and stuff like that. With art, I feel like if I had ever tried to sell art, I should be thinking the same thing. I'm just going to get it out there. If it sells, wonderful. If it doesn't, I've tried, I can always improve and do better next time and see how I go. Because nobody will ever get anywhere if they don't try. That's the main thing that I have to learn, is that if you don't try, you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna be able to ever get anywhere if you don't even try. And sometimes you have to just think, what's the worst thing that could happen? Is it really that bad to fail? Like, really? Is it really that bad? Who are you trying to prove to? Like, does it really matter? Like, you gotta at least try, because you never know how things are gonna work out if you don't try. Like, I remember years ago, I'd be like, oh, I just don't want to film anymore because I'm obviously not doing well enough, because I kept tying all my results to my motivation. So I was like, oh, I'm not doing well. I'm not gonna even bother. And then I quit for a long time, and then of course nothing's gonna happen if you quit, right? So, you have to just keep trying and just keep finding that motivation. You have to find it, and it has to be not from an end result. You can't tie it to, it has to do a certain amount, like it has to do well with other people. You have to just tie your motivation to your own actions. That's the only way that it's going to really work. I often feel like if we could just get through that little bit of that slump, when we get into that slump of, oh, I just don't want to continue anymore, it's getting hard. I feel like if we could just get through that hump, we could really get to places. Like, a lot of times I've noticed with me is that I'm all excited about something, and then I reach a slump. The slump could just be some kind of stress. It could be like, oh, I don't know what to write next, or I can't figure out what to do, or whatever. Like, just something that's a little bit stressful. And then the slump sort of turns into more stress, and then soon what happens is, what I do is I kind of start distracting myself with something else. So I'd be like ditching that to work on something else. That obviously, when you're doing something else, it's more of a, like, you're taking a break, and it's going to be less stressful. So that's what I always find. When I'm getting stressed about something, I want to move on to something else that's less stressful, and then I start doing that thing, and then I start realizing how fun it is because it's not as stressful as the other thing. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, I just want to do that unstressful thing. And that's how I always just lose track of what I'm doing, and then I lose motivation. So what I'm working on right now is I gotta get through the hump. I gotta get through this, like, hump? Really? Did I just say hump? Slump, not hump. Well, it is a hump if you think about it. It's like a speed table. Anyway, so I think that if I could just get through this difficult, like, if I'm feeling like, oh, things are getting stressful, instead of just running away from it, because a lot of times you'll find running away from it will be really fun, and you just want to, like, escape, consume something, I don't know, just forget about it. Like, I have to really try to work through it and just not distract myself. Sometimes it is better not to just consume stuff when you're trying to concentrate. Like, I find that I have to consume things that make me feel positive about myself. That's the only way that I can actually keep going with something. If I'm watching something that's kind of making me feel a bit doubtful of myself, then I know, okay, that's not going to go well. So I have to really concentrate on what's making me feel really good at the moment. So I'll consume that. And that's really fun, because when you're feeling good, you'll find that it's going to be easier to continue. But if someone is making you feel insecure in some ways, like, oh, maybe like they're living a really wonderful life and you just feel like it can never happen, or something like that, it's making you feel like you're not as good. Because a lot of times if you watch too many success stories of people getting it really quickly, you end up feeling like there could be something wrong with you, and then you're just not going to be able to do it. And that's a really bad thing to do by consuming those, because what you need to know is that those are the stories of the success. That's obviously, you're not going to hear about the people who are still struggling, who are working hard every day, who's doing all the work that they can to reach their dreams. You're not going to hear of the stories of people who are still going because they haven't reached the success yet. So all you're going to really see are the really big success stories. So of course it's going to probably make you feel like you're not as good, or you won't ever get there. So I really do recommend that you consume only things that makes you feel positive about yourself. And there's plenty of people that I even listen to that makes me feel so good and so pumped that every time I hear them talk, I'm like, oh, I gotta work now. So that's what's really, really important. I feel like that is just one of the best things you can do, that's like continues your flow of creativity. And you might want to consume things that might make you feel a bit doubtful. Just sometimes it's just the way we work. Like, we almost want to like consume something that makes us feel more insecure. Have you noticed that? That's happened to me. Like, I'm like, why am I consuming this when I'm feeling doubtful afterwards? But that's the self-awareness. Like, it's so important to realize that, okay, this is happening. I need to like limit myself of how much time I spend on this particular thing if I'm going to come away feeling doubtful, because you don't want any doubts. You just want to keep going with it. So many success, or like so much of what is really about like continuing, not giving up. That's like one of the biggest things. I feel like not giving up is a true path to success. I feel so philosophical when I say that, but yes. Anyway, I think like right now I'm just really trying to write as much as I can, and because I'm getting up to like 25,000 words, I'm starting to like lack. I've not know what I'm going to write about, and it's kind of almost cool in a way, because then I get to really squeeze out my memories. And right now I'm trying to figure out, okay, like I could add a new section here, like maybe of a part of my life that I thought I would leave out for that time. And now I'm like, okay, I can write about it. And what can I write about that's going to be quite valuable, and that's like a good life lesson to share, or pretty funny or crazy, or a story that I would want people to just read and laugh about because it's so ridiculous. That's what I really enjoy doing. And I find that the more I write, the more proud I am of this work. It's like, oh wow, look at this. I've created this giant document of 45 pages of Word right now. It's like, that's how long it is. And I feel like, wow, look at this. Like, I've written all my stories on this. Like, not all of them. Of course, I still lack some that I'm working on. But I'm like, wow, look, I've put so much stuff on there, and I can still add more. And it's going to be wonderful, because one thing that I love, what Gary Vee says all the time, is that sometimes you have to tell your story or tell the same message like 580,000 times, because it could be just that one time you've said it in that one way that gets through to this one person. And ever since I heard him say that, I have just completely changed the way I put out content. I realized that I could repeat the same messages, just say it in a different way, because I enjoy listening to the same messages said in different ways. I really do. I love it. I feel like it's a confirmation, it's an affirmation to my mind that, oh, I'm hearing it over and over, and I feel like other people could benefit. And it's so important for me to write my story in different formats as well, because I know some people might prefer reading, even though it's not something I like to do as much. I like to listen. So you know what, when I finish publishing this book, I'm also going to get an audio version of it, which is wonderful. I'm going to like save up money so I can make an audio book of this story, which will be even more exciting, because I just cannot wait for that. And that's going to be such an experience that I'll never forget. And everything's going to be so cool, because I am letting go of that fear. What if I fail at this? What if I don't do well? Which has been my thought for the past, 20 years, 15 years, whatever years it was. I've been thinking, what if I fail at this? What if nobody cares about it? I can at least know, hey, I've tried. So that's going to be the most important thing. And you're going to sometimes just run into fears like, oh, what if it gets bad reviews? What if people hate it? What if and then you're just going to think, okay, I don't think people as horrible as you make it out. A lot of times we have all this fear in our heads of what people could say, or you make up a million nasty things that people say. I've done that, where I'm like thinking every nasty thing in the sun, and then I end up not even getting 1% of that kind of stuff, and I'm like, wow, people are so much nicer than I thought. That's, it's like a lot of times that's happened to me. So I feel like, okay, now I just have to work on my fears, because that's going to be the ultimate what stops me from publishing this book is fear. And I'm going to be like, oh, I'm too scared, I'm going to do this and do that. So now I have to just keep doing it. I have to acknowledge my fears. I have to not tie this book into any kind of result, so I can't be motivated to do it because I think it's going to do well or not do well. I have to just want to do it and realize that my actions is the only thing I can control. Everything else is not in my control, therefore I shouldn't even think about it. Detach myself. That's very important. That's what I do with my YouTube videos, which helps me so much. It actually helps me not overthink things, and I find that I'm able to make so much more without worrying about whether this will do well or that will do. I just do things that I feel like will help, and that's all. Like, I don't have to overthink things. It's so wonderful, because just the amount of things I've been able to produce because I'm not fearful is so important. Like, fear will just stop you from doing almost everything. It's quite scary how much it can affect people. You'll find that so many times you have to just make the decision to do something that you kind of fear, because you just have to decide, like, at this moment in time, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. That's it. Like, you make the decision and you do it. That's what I have to tell myself, because if I just kind of dawdle and say, oh, maybe I'll do it tomorrow, maybe I'll do it next week, maybe I'll do it next month, I end up never doing it. But if I think, I'm going to do it today, I'm going to do it right now, and I start, yes, I do it. So that's another very important thing, is just writing this novel. Not novel. I keep thinking it's a novel, but it's really just I consider it to be a memoir, because that's kind of what the style I'm looking at that fits what I'm doing. It's like reflecting on life lessons and talking about memories. So that's kind of what it is. And I just have to think about how much value it could bring, and that's what I have to focus on. So that's what I'm focusing on right now. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's going to be a lot of fun to complete, because oh my god, can you imagine the excitement what I'm gonna have when I finally finish? Like, when I finish this story, it's going to be like like, it'll feel like a piece of gold, just because it's like, oh my god, it's got all the gold nuggets in there of life left. Like, it's like literally gold nuggets. Like, that's like, maybe I should put some gold in the pages. Oh, I'm just kidding. But you know what? That's just going to be how it feels, because I would have put so much effort and time and just into this book that it's going to be so exciting when I finish it. And I just keep thinking, like, why didn't I do this earlier? Why didn't I do so many things earlier? Maybe I should really consider doing some of the things that I gave up years ago because I was too afraid. Because now I feel like I have more tools under my belt to be able to figure out how to actually go through with it, even though I'm really scared. Although sometimes I'm not good at it. I might have to listen to my own advice, because that would really help. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, I don't even know how to, like, do this. And, that's an excuse. You're just saying that because you don't want to, because it's scary. Like, it's quite crazy the amount of times you'll say to yourself, I don't know how, therefore I can't do it. And you actually realize that that is an excuse, because how you do it is a Google search away, literally. Like, I remember thinking when I was first going to do this story, I was like, oh, I don't know how to self-publish. And then I realized, this YouTube freaking search. Just search it on there. And then I found like a bunch of videos about it. And guess what? Now, when I'm on there, it's giving me all these suggested content about how to write a story. So I'm like, okay, yeah, you know what? There's a plenty of information. It's just whether I'm willing to look at it, because whether I'm willing to take risks is really just how it is. So writing this story has been such a life-changing experience for me. It's only been about a week. I was not even a week yet. And I feel like I'm learning so much. And I just want it to keep going. And I really, really want to see this in a physical form one day. I can envision it right now. That's what I'm trying to do, is that I'm trying to envision this book as a physical copy in my hands. I want this to happen. I'm going to manifest it in my mind. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to do work on it. But I even drew a picture for it, which I haven't like really drawn anything for a year or so. I just suddenly felt really motivated, and I have some ideas of what I want to call it. I haven't like 100% decided, but yeah, it's just so exciting. So I want to keep you guys all updated. Some days it'll just be like a short vlog about it, but anyway, yeah, this has been an eye-opener for me, just because it's another thing to help me overcome all my fears. And I hope that you really find the courage to do something like that you've always wanted, because of how important I know it is when you finally finish it. Like, instead of like doing it and starting it and then just not continuing, and it is most likely you'll run into some kind of block or something that's stressing you or something that you can't think of, and then it's like, it's better to just quit than continue. I feel like one of the greatest things that I could do right now is to finish something. That's going to be my ultimate goal, and what I truly want to focus on in so many of my stuff is to actually go through with something. That's going to be so valuable because hopefully it will motivate you to finish something too. Anyway, thank you so much for listening as usual, and please let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about particularly, or if you'd like to be on the show, let me know and subscribe for more, because I will definitely make a lot more of these podcasts.